My name is Kennedy Walsh. I'm 35 years old and currently serve as Director of Strategic Acquisitions at Northbridge Systems, a business software company headquartered in Denver, Colorado. My job is to analyze markets, identify promising startups, and lead negotiations to bring them into Northbridge's ecosystem. I manage a team of 12 people and work directly with our finance, legal, and tech departments. Over the past 18 months, we've closed 6 deals, each giving our company a distinct competitive edge. But if you ask my older brother, Garrett, he'd say I'm just the little sister who does marketing, nothing more. Garrett is 4 years older than me, lives in San Francisco, and has been treated like a tech prodigy ever since he built his first computer in 6th grade with birthday money. Me? I was decorating notebooks with markers and sparkly stickers. From that moment on, our family quietly established an unspoken hierarchy. Garrett was the brain, and I was the background. Expected to smile at the right time and stay out of conversations about innovation or product strategy. In college, I chose business administration at the University of Michigan. Garrett went to Stanford for computer science. When I announced that I'd landed an internship at a venture capital firm in Chicago, my mother just nodded, then turned to ask Garrett if he had finished the blockchain model his professor assigned. Of course, he hadn't. But Garrett's story always mattered more. For years, I avoided confrontation. I kept my achievements to myself. When I was promoted to Director of Strategy at Northbridge at 32, earlier than most peers, I just texted my mom a short note and said nothing more. Garrett, on the other hand, was constantly broadcasting. Zoom calls with the family to show off podcast invites. Instagram photos from his glass office with captions like, "Staring out at the city and seeing the future of tech." And me? I was the one who led a $60 million acquisition of an AI startup in Seattle, and no one noticed. Except for one person, my grandmother, Edna. She was a former math professor at a community college in Arizona back in the 70s when women weren't typically the ones at the chalkboard. She knew what it felt like to be underestimated, not being a man, not being a coder. At 80, she owned an iPad, knew how to use Google Sheets to calculate interest, and still remembered her email password. Unlike my dad, who had to reset everything every month. "You don't need to shout to be seen," she once told me during a Christmas Eve dinner while Garrett was going on and on about seed beef funding. "But when it matters, you'd better stand up, not to boast, but to claim the seat that should have been yours." I never forgot those words. But even 3 years later, I still hadn't acted on them. Maybe I hesitated, or maybe I knew that in Garrett's eyes, my work would never feel real. He once said to me at a family gathering, "You do marketing for a software company? Sounds like writing slogans for stuff you don't even understand." I swallowed hard and smiled, but in my head, a vow sparked to life. One day, Garrett would hear my name, not from our mother, but from a corporate boardroom of a billion-dollar tech firm, where I had the power to approve deals he never even knew I touched. I didn't know exactly when Garrett's company started to unravel. He always had a way of making everything look like it was taking off. Glass-walled offices, whiteboards packed with ideas, Zoom calls with the Embarcadero skyline of San Francisco as his background. His startup, Bitewave Labs, was mentioned in a blog post titled "Top 10 Promising AI Companies in the Bay Area" 2 years ago, right when the market was hungry for deep learning investments. That night, Garrett called our parents, hyping up his Series A funding round like an IPO was just around the corner. I didn't say anything. I quietly looked up the original article. It was sponsored content, a PR piece, not an expert review. Bitewave Labs was mentioned briefly, listed behind 8 other companies that actually held patents. But my family, they were elated. My mom called me at 7 a.m. the next morning just to say, "Garrett's going places. You should be proud of your brother." I was proud, but something felt off. Last spring, I started picking up on subtle signals from investment partners. a few venture capital funds that had previously backed Bitewave began pulling out of similar projects. At a networking event in Dallas, an analyst quietly told me Bitewave was burning through cash faster than they could control. Another, from the legal sector, shared that they'd been asked to review equity contracts, usually a sign a company was preparing to sell or offload intellectual property. I didn't ask Garrett, and he didn't say a word. When I visited home for my dad's birthday in October, Garrett was still performing. Generative AI is the future. My team's optimizing the deep learning pipeline to cut render time by 60%. The issue now isn't technical. It's about scaling to market. I smiled, set my wine glass down, and didn't challenge him. But I knew people who are truly succeeding don't have to explain themselves in such elaborate detail. Then, on a Tuesday at 6:30 a.m., I received an email from Northbridge Systems' Investment Opportunity Analysis Team. Subject line, Potential Acquisition Target, Bitewave Labs. I shot upright in my chair. The report was 8 pages long, outlining Bitwave's core technology, intellectual property, and one line in bold red. Financial instability projected to default within 120 days. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Just 3 weeks earlier, Garrett had appeared on a startup podcast, speaking like a tech oracle. Sometimes you have to know when to go all in. That's the difference between a founder and an employee. Did he even realize how close to collapse he was? Or was he still living inside the illusion he'd built? I brought the report to the meeting room on the 19th floor, where Monica, my direct supervisor, was waiting. I told her everything, that the founder of Bitewave was my brother, and that I'd been present at every family dinner where he crowned himself the voice of a new tech generation. Monica sat quietly, then said, "So what do you think? Is the company worth saving?" I took a few seconds before answering. The technology is solid, but they need leadership. Garrett has never known how to turn a concept into a viable strategy. Monica nodded, as calmly as she always did when dissecting a deal. Then let Northbridge do what it does best. But you'll step back from the main negotiations. Advisory role only. We'll keep everything above board. I agreed, but deep inside I felt something strange. I was about to step into Garrett's world, not as his sister, but as someone with the authority to make decisions that could determine the future of his company. I didn't know if he'd be able to handle that, or if he'd see me as the one who flipped the table. I reopened the investment file at 8 p.m., sitting alone in the glass-walled office on the 25th floor of Northbridge Systems. The city lights of Denver sparkled outside, but in my mind only one question echoed. Am I about to acquire my own brother's company? Each week, my team filters through dozens of startups. Most collapse before the first round of review. But Bitewave Labs was different. Despite its bleak finances, the company held a computer vision model far ahead of competitors. This wasn't your typical generative AI for pretty images. Their technology processed real-time visual data for industrial and drone applications, an area full of potential. I was the first to see its value. I marked Bitewave as a top priority Tier A target during our early March strategy meeting. Back then, I didn't know Garrett was the founder. I remember vividly the moment I opened the second round technical audit report. The name Garrett Walsh, founder and CTO, hit me like a punch to the chest. I checked twice. No mistake. Garrett had never listed his full name on public channels. On podcasts, he introduced himself only as Garrett from Bitewave. He had hidden it, like he was deliberately separating the real world from the narrative he'd built. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the screen. It felt both foreign and deeply familiar. In family dinners, Garrett spoke of Bitewave as if he held the future in his hands. But inside my internal systems, he was just a red-coded name. signaling a level 3 financial risk under acquisition review. The next day, I formally requested to recuse myself from the main negotiations. Monica, my manager, didn't press for details. She said, Kennedy, I want you advising from this side. We don't pass up a potential acquisition over personal ties, but everything must be documented clearly and cleanly. Understood. I'll let Nate lead. I'll stay focused on tech analysis and integration planning. The deeper I dug into Bytewave's data, the clearer the truth became. One I doubted Garrett ever dared to face. Bytewave was collapsing from within. They had a product, but no market strategy. No sales team, no partnership pipeline, no stable customer base. They were surviving on the hope of the next funding round. And when the VC market began tightening, cracks turned into breaks. One paragraph in the report stopped me cold. The company delayed payroll twice in Q4 of last year. An estimated 60% of technical staff may exit within 90 days without new funding. I thought of Heather, Garrett's wife, the calm, steady nurse at San Mateo's Central Hospital. They had 2 kids, one about to start kindergarten, one barely speaking full sentences. Garrett was playing a high-stakes game with no chips left to bet, and I was the first person to realize it, not as a sister, but as the director responsible for determining the fate of his company. Some nights I couldn't sleep, not because I feared failure, but because I didn't know when or how the truth should be said. I didn't want to humiliate Garrett, but I also wouldn't let him keep living in a story that wasn't real. I wasn't the little sister with a whiteboard eraser anymore. In the 3rd week of closed-door negotiations, Nate called. We're nearly there. Garrett doesn't know who flagged the acquisition. He thinks Northbridge is just rescuing a promising startup. Do you want to tell him before the internal announcement? I said nothing. Part of me wanted to call Garrett and say, I know everything. Another part wanted to wait, to see how he'd tell the story, thinking no one in the family knew the truth. I didn't want to shatter the silence. I wanted it to collapse on its own, at the moment when the truth could no longer be hidden. And Easter was coming. My mom had texted the family group chat. Everyone's coming to Grandma's this year. Garrett's bringing a Napa Valley Red. Kennedy, can you do the roast chicken? I read the message and set my phone down. There would be wine this Easter. There would be roast chicken. And there would be a truth I no longer intended to hide. I stepped out of the meeting room on the 20th floor where the legal team had just finalized the last batch of documents for the Bytewave deal. The late afternoon light slanted through the row of glass windows, casting a soft halo across the cool gray tile floor. I looked at my reflection on the ground. Neat, composed, and unreadable. Exactly how I had behaved for the past 3 months. I wasn't the one signing the documents. That was clearly documented in the official records. Nate had led the entire negotiation process. I only played the role of strategic advisor, supporting the financial structure and ensuring all parties followed proper merger procedures. But everyone at Northbridge knew every major deal started with the analysis sheet I drafted. Monica didn't let me stay on the sidelines for long. She knew I understood Bytewave's technical ecosystem better than anyone. I'd sat in the office until 9 p.m. dissecting every line of IP documentation, every clause on patent ownership, every NDA that hadn't been renewed. I was the one who spotted a gap in the equity agreement with a former partner, something that could have canceled the deal at the last minute if left unresolved. And I was also the one who proposed retaining Bytewave's core engineering team under a 1-year cooperative contract instead of dissolving the whole team as originally planned. And Garrett? He still didn't know I was the one who initiated it all. In the closed meetings, Garrett appeared with his usual confident demeanor. Gray suit, navy tie, voice full of energy, like he was hosting a TED Talk. When asked about the restructuring strategy, he replied, "Bytewave is ready to level up. Northbridge is the ideal partner. We chose this deal. We weren't chosen." I sat behind the frosted glass in the observation room, listening to it all. No reaction, no interruptions, just careful note-taking. The truth is, I wasn't angry. I understood Garrett. He had spent his whole life trying to be the pathfinder, to hold on to the image our family unconsciously built for him. Admitting he was being acquired, even under a favorable contract, was like tearing out a piece of his identity. But I was different. I no longer needed to prove myself. I was in that room not for praise, not to earn recognition, but because I knew exactly where my value lay. In the final week before the internal announcement, Monica called a closed-door meeting with the senior directors. The goal? To prepare the internal communication for the Bytewave acquisition. I presented the key points. Bytewave owns a real-time visual data processing platform that can be integrated into our flagship product by Q3. The engineering team will be retained under a satellite team model. The founder, Garrett Walsh, will serve as a technical advisor for 1 year, reporting directly to the product division. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Monica asked, "Are you okay with this, Kennedy?" I looked her straight in the eye. "It's the right decision. I have no personal objections. All conflicts have been handled through the proper channels." She nodded. "Good. But brace yourself. He'll find out soon, and when he does, things won't be as clean as they are today." I knew that, and I was already prepared. That evening, I came home late. Michael, my boyfriend, a high school history teacher, was sitting on the couch reading. He looked up at me with the calm eyes I was always grateful for. "Everything okay?" I took off my coat and sat beside him. "Bytewave's officially confirmed. The deal will be announced after Easter." "Garrett still doesn't know?" "No, but he will, most likely at the dinner table." Michael gently shook his head. Maybe it's time." I leaned my head on his shoulder and let out a soft breath. That Easter, the sky was crystal clear, the kind of clarity you only get in the suburbs of Boulder in April. The last of the late-season snow had melted, revealing stretches of fresh green grass soaking in the sunlight. Michael and I parked in front of my grandmother's single-story house, a red brick home with a white porch that had hosted nearly 30 years of family gatherings, with her signature apple pie, always baked just to keep the tradition alive. Michael squeezed my hand as we stepped onto the porch. "You ready?" "Depends. If Garrett's putting on his usual show, I might need a whole bottle of wine." Inside, the air was thick with the smell of roasted meat and warm bread, mixed with familiar laughter and greetings. My mom rushed out to meet us, still wearing the old bunny print apron from when I was in high school. "Kennedy, Michael, come in. Everyone's in the living room. Garrett just told a funny story about startup culture, had everyone cracking up." I didn't ask. I was well acquainted with Garrett's version of funny stories, usually just sugar-coated ways to talk about himself. The living room was cozy. As expected, my brother stood in the center of the room, wine glass in hand, speaking with the polish of someone pitching to investors. Heather, his wife, sat on the couch, smiling stiffly. My dad nodded along, completely engaged. And that's when I realized it was the perfect time to step back. A good founder doesn't just know how to build, they know when to exit. The market's shifting, but if you're sharp, you don't wait for the tide to turn. You sell early and stay in control. I walked in just as he wrapped up. Garrett spotted me and smiled. "There she is, my little sister. The only one in the family who understands PowerPoint but still thinks AI stands for American Idol." Scattered chuckles followed, not because it was funny, but because everyone was used to Garrett's way of drowning people out with his confidence and condescension. I just offered a faint smile. You've still got that stage presence, huh? I gotta keep it up. This startup was my baby. So what are you up to these days? Still writing those product descriptions? I didn't have a chance to answer before Grandma chimed in from the dining table, where she was arranging napkins. Entity works in strategic mergers. I believe that takes more than just writing descriptions. Garrett acted like he didn't hear her. He turned back to Dad. Anyway, you should really consider investing in visual AI. Companies like Bitewave are proof, vision, technology, and a well-timed exit. I saw Michael lift his glass, trying to suppress a smirk. Heather glanced at me. There was something in her eyes. Almost guilt. Dinner began. Platters of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and salad circled the table alongside small talk, check-ins, and proud displays of grandkids' photos. But Garrett didn't stop. He remained the center of attention, talking about seed rounds, Series B funding, like he was giving a tech history lecture to the whole table. I stayed quiet, serving Michael food, listening like a passive spectator. But in my head, each of his words echoed with a different tone, because I knew what was really behind the curtain Garrett had drawn over the family's eyes. Then, just as my mom topped off Dad's wine, Garrett suddenly turned to me. So Kennedy, you hear anything about Synergy Tech acquiring some computer vision startup? Word is they're scooping up companies like that to build out their own product. That space is heating up. I set my knife down. I've heard a few things, but if you want specifics, maybe ask them, or better yet, ask Northbridge Systems directly. Garrett chuckled. You think I don't know they're acquiring Bitewave? I signed the deal. The terms were great, really great. That's what a smart founder does. Knows when to hold on and when to let go. Michael leaned toward me, speaking low. He's spinning a win out of thin air. I nodded slightly, but said nothing. And then, as if something stirred within me, I looked up and met Grandma's eyes. Steady, sharp, like they always were when she solved the last line of a difficult math problem. She gave me a small nod. Didn't say a word, but I understood. Garrett was halfway through spinning one of his trademark negotiation stories, this time about how he supposedly played the deal with Northbridge Systems like a chess match, executing every move with precision and convincing their entire board with his strategic vision. He spoke in that slow, self-satisfied tone of his, pouring wine into his glass like he was toasting to a victory he had just fabricated. Actually, he concluded, raising his glass, that deal happened because I initiated it. Northbridge wasn't planning to buy it first, but once they saw me make the first move, they realized they were staring at an opportunity they couldn't afford to miss. My mom gave a light applause. My dad chuckled with pride. Garrett, I've always said you really do have a gift for negotiation. I set my fork down, but stayed quiet. Michael glanced at me, but I held my silence. The atmosphere was one-directional. Everyone was listening to Garrett, and no one wanted to interrupt. Except for one person. My grandmother. Edna was quietly dabbing her mouth with a napkin, moving slowly, as if preparing for something important. She set her teacup down, eyes cast downward, but her voice rang clearer than anyone else's at the table. Oh, so you were the one who initiated that deal? Garrett hesitated. Yes, pretty much. I mean, the idea came from me. That's strange, she interrupted, not harsh, but sharp enough, because unless I'm mistaken, the first person to identify Bitewave as a strategic acquisition target was Kennedy, not you. The room froze for a beat. Garrett furrowed his brows. What? What do you mean? Grandma Edna remained calm. I asked Kennedy about her work a few weeks ago, about this deal. She didn't hide anything. She's the one who placed Bitewave on Northbridge's strategic priority list. I heard a glass clink lightly against the table. My mom had set hers down, her eyes bouncing between me and Grandma. My dad leaned in slightly as if he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Wait, Garrett gave a nervous laugh. Kennedy made the proposal? I looked him in the eye. I'm the director of acquisition strategy at Northbridge Systems. I didn't take part in the direct negotiations due to a conflict of interest, but yes, I was the one who first proposed the acquisition. Barrett sat up straighter, like someone had just pulled the confidence chair out from under him. That's impossible. There's no way you were involved in that deal. No one ever mentioned your name. I nodded. Because you never asked? That line hit the room like a stone tossed into a still lake. Heather turned to Garrett, her lips pressed tightly. The entire table was silent. Garrett was still reeling. So, all this time, you were tracking my company from the inside? I kept my tone even. Not tracking, analyzing. Bitewave has solid tech, but a disastrous financial model. If Northbridge hadn't acquired it, you would have gone under in 3 months. You, Garrett looked around the room, searching for allies. You knew this and said nothing? I nodded without flinching. That's protocol. I disclosed the conflict, recused myself from the negotiations, and only served in an advisory capacity, within full legal compliance. I did my job. Nothing more, nothing less. Garrett's fingers clenched the edge of the table. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone? I exhaled, slowly. I'm not saying this to humiliate you. I'm saying it because you're telling a story that isn't true. And this family deserves the truth. Grandma took a sip of her tea, nodding slowly. Well done, Kennedy. My mom hesitated. You've held that position. Since when? It's over 2 years now, Mom. Another wave of silence settled over the table. Not anticipation this time, but realization. A recognition of the daughter no one had asked, so what do you do these days for many, many years? Garrett stared at me for a long moment. In his eyes, I didn't just see anger. I saw confusion. Like the entire map of the world in his head had just been flipped upside down. Garrett pushed his chair back from the table and stood up abruptly, as if he could no longer bear the stifling air tightening around him. The way he stood there, in a room full of family, yet suffocatingly silent, instantly pulled me back to childhood. The years when all eyes were on him, and I was just a shadow on the fringe. He said nothing. No apology, no denial. Just stared at me for a few more seconds, then turned and walked out of the dining room toward the front porch. The door didn't slam, but it closed with enough finality to signal he wanted to talk, but elsewhere. I stood up instinctively. No one stopped me. The entire table seemed frozen in either shock or gratitude, grateful someone had stepped into that silence on their behalf. Garrett sat on the steps, elbow on his knee, chin resting in his palm, eyes fixed on the line of trees across the street. I walked over and sat beside him, leaving just enough distance not to intrude. After a long pause, he finally spoke. You know what I hate most? What? Being pitied. I turned, but he didn't look back. I don't pity you, Garrett. I just stopped pretending I didn't know the truth. He gave a dry laugh. I thought I was in control, that I was selling at the right time, that I was steering a deal like a true founder, but in reality, my company had been flashing red in your system since February, hadn't it? I didn't deny it. I never wanted it to come to that, but I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines just because the founder was you. Bitewave had good tech. It deserved to be saved. And I knew how to make that happen. He turned toward me, truly looking at me for the first time since we sat down. You're damn good, Kennedy. So good it's hard for me to believe. I clenched my hands over my knees. I'm not better than you. I just don't broadcast what I do. You, on the other hand, you embellished things that hadn't even happened. A long silence followed. Then Garrett sighed. There was a time I really thought Bitewave was going to be huge. Everything clicked early on. The seed round came fast. Press was excited. The junior devs idolized me like I was Steve Jobs. But then revenue didn't come. Partners started asking for metrics, for results. I delayed, I danced around, and eventually I started lying to myself. I was surprised to see his eyes glisten, not with anger, but with disappointment. I mortgaged the house. Heather doesn't even know. You know what it's like. Waking up every morning afraid of getting an email warning from your VC, afraid people will figure out Garrett Walsh is just a decent programmer, not a leader. I bit my lip. I stopped believing I was enough, so I spoke louder, got more arrogant, just to drown out that voice inside, screaming that I was failing. I wasn't angry anymore. Sitting there wasn't the arrogant Garrett I'd always known, but a man struggling beneath the illusion he'd built since he was 12. I answered softly, "Selling your company doesn't make you a failure. The only failure would be if you learned nothing from it." Garrett gave a bitter chuckle. "And you? What did you learn from letting me take all the credit while you sat there in silence?" I answered plainly, that silence doesn't preserve peace. It just prolongs misunderstanding. He looked at me, this time without defensiveness. "I made you feel small for years, didn't I?" I nodded, but I let it happen too. I thought staying quiet made me noble, but really I was just denying myself the right to be seen. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. It wasn't poetic, but it came from the truest part of him." I smiled for the first time in years. "I'm not the little girl standing next to your presentation anymore, Garrett. I don't live in your shadow. And I don't need you to shrink so I can shine." He smiled too. "Good, because for the first time, I honestly want to learn from you." We sat there a while longer, saying nothing, just watching the warm light spill onto the porch from the house behind us, listening to the faint clinking of spoons and plates from inside. And I knew, after nearly 3 decades, for the first time, we weren't talking as rivals, but as two people who had finally, truly seen each other. 3 weeks after that Easter evening, I received an email with the simple subject line, "Reconfirmation of technical advisor role, Garrett Walsh." It arrived right as I was in a meeting with Monica and the technical integration team, preparing for the onboarding phase of Bitewave into the Northbridge Systems ecosystem. I opened the email, skimmed the beginning, and nodded. Garrett had signed. No rambling, no complaints, just his digital signature, followed by 3 short sentences. "Thank you for not giving up. I still have a lot to learn. See you at HQ next month." I didn't reply immediately. I just leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and felt something fall into place. Light, but deep. We started working together exactly 1 week later, during our first virtual meeting with the Bitewave engineering team. Garrett sat at one end of the nameplate row, next to Marcus, the head of technical integration. I was at the other end in my role as strategy director. But this time, I didn't have to hide my name, my role, or anything else. What surprised me was that Garrett didn't interrupt, didn't boast, didn't throw sarcastic comments. When Marcus presented the plan to modularize the product into reusable API components, Garrett asked only 3 questions, all focused on processor performance and scalability. And when a young engineer from the Northbridge team hesitantly pushed back, Garrett nodded, listened, then suggested a middle ground solution. I barely recognized him, not because he had completely changed, but because for the first time, he chose to stand beside me instead of above me. That afternoon, as I left the meeting room, something even stranger happened. My father called. Hi, Kennedy. I just wanted to ask a bit about your job. Could you explain your role at Northbridge to me again? I mean, really specifically. I froze, phone in hand, my heartbeat slowing for a second. My dad. The man who once thought M&A was an Italian salad dressing was now asking seriously about my job. So I told him, step by step, from market analysis to evaluating potential to how I structured deals while balancing intellectual property and human capital. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he simply said, "You're really good at this, Kennedy. Sorry I didn't see it sooner." I didn't know what to say. I just smiled. It's not too late, Dad. 2 days later, my mom sent a message in the family group chat. Hey everyone, next month Kennedy's giving a talk at a tech conference in Austin. Who wants to go cheer her on? And the most unexpected thing happened. For the first time ever, Garrett reacted with a heart. No sarcasm, no good luck marketing wizard comments. Just a red heart. The next month, when Garrett flew to Denver to begin his first week at Northbridge, I met him in the hallway on the 6th floor, home to the technical integration office. He stepped off the elevator, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair tousled from the early flight. "Good morning, boss lady." He grinned. "Hope I'm not late to the first meeting." I squinted at him. "You're off the hook if you buy coffee after." He nodded. Already ordered on the app, payment accepted in the form of technical feedback. And in that moment, I realized the strangest truth. We could actually work together, not as two kids fighting over the living room couch, but as two professionals who understood that lasting success comes from complementing each other, not competing. As he stepped into the meeting room, I walked behind him, no longer feeling like I had to stay silent to keep the peace. I didn't need to live in anyone's shadow anymore. And the best part? No one in my family wanted me to either. Kennedy's story shows that true recognition doesn't come from speaking the loudest. It comes from consistently proving your worth through action. In real life, many people like her quietly succeed, even when underestimated by family or society. But when the truth is spoken at the right moment, it has the power to shift long-held perceptions. Sometimes you don't need to win every argument. You just need to stand firm so your light isn't overshadowed by someone else's. What do you think about Kennedy's journey and the shift within her family? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.